Okay. Okay. I will make sure. Do I need any opening? Okay. So we can ask question if we have time. So our next speech is about our analysis of IBM and the Red Hat developments when what system is the issues are at play and how the community can build more realistic system in the future. So let's welcome Simon Buckner.
Pretty good, thank you. 大家好，我叫 Simon, and that is about all the Chinese I know. So the rest of the speech will be in English. Oh, and yeah, I jump around a lot, so cameraman is going to be busy. Oh, but I guess I'll have to stick to the screen to actually transition to the slides. I want to talk about corporate control of free software projects. And initially, the subtitle here said we had some conversion issues from the LibreOffice format. So here it would say, community lessons from IBM and Red Hat. And then the community lessons should be struck out. And it should say, community questions from, to be learned from IBM and Red Hat. Because this talk turned out to be very different from what I had thought it would be. A few words about myself first, though. As I said, my name is Simon. I volunteer for the Free Software Foundation Europe. We have a booth here at COSCUP. So if you want to, come over to the other building. It's in the T building. I want to say 3rd floor, if I don't misremember. Visit our booth. We can give out stamps by scanning people's QR codes. And we have a lot of stickers over there, so come by and visit us. As my daytime job, at this point, I run my own consultancy. So I work as a IT consultant, which basically means I help organizations solve hard problems. That is what I like to do. There are a lot of side benefits of being your own boss. For example, I can now say, everything I say in this talk is my opinion, but it's also the opinion of my employer. So I can say whatever the heck I want and not get fired. Hey, that is pretty nice. What are these hard problems? What are questions that I help with? And why can you listen to me give this speech? They are questions like, how can we use free and open source software in our organization legally and securely? So I deal with license compliance issues, security issues. How can we use free and open source software to run our business more efficiently, right? Or to run our organization more efficiently? I consult both for-profits and non-for-profits organization. And IT should be there to get things done, right? So that's what I focus on. Other stuff that I can help with is improve software architecture to be more secure and resilient, and how can we build successful teams and successful communities. That is to say, I analyze, design, and improve systems, both technical systems and organizational systems, social systems. And that is going to be important for this talk in a minute, because I want to talk about different systems we build in the community in a mix of cooperation and projects. This whole thing, like the whole reason I'm here, really started out at FOSDEM. So the first inception for this talk was a panel. Oh, it's not progressing through the slides. I didn't realize. Oh, okay, cool. So you can see my very sophisticated slide design. I'm a minimalist at heart. I design improved systems. We had. Okay, this is important because this has the QR code for the talk I'm referencing for the panel. There was a panel at FOSDEM this year that says, Red Hat Enterprise Linux and CentOS, and the growth of open washing in FOSS. So very, very catchy title, very watch baity if you ask me. But the panel itself was really interesting. And they had like the director of Alma Linux on there and the Conservancy on there, so folks that know a lot about licensing and legal issues. And if you don't know anything about that whole IBM Red Hat CentOS thing, what happened is, so Red Hat Enterprise Linux is a very commercially driven enterprise Linux distribution. They sell it for money. Basically, you get a subscription, a support license. And all of it, even under this subscription license, is free software, right? So you get your rights under the GPL, and you can do whatever you want with it. And there are some issues around that they analyzed that I'm not going to talk about. But for a long, long time, Red Hat used to be one of like the paragons of like, this is how you do open source and business, and like fit them all together in a very community-friendly way. And over the last couple of years, it correlates, in time-wise, it correlates with the IBM takeover, although there is a lot of discussion. So IBM bought Red Hat. There is a lot of discussion around how much they are actually influencing it, but just time-wise, it strongly correlates with a lot of stuff. And there used to be a community project run by volunteers, the CentOS project, that basically took publicly available sources of Red Hat, made a binary distribution out of it that anybody could use for free. And at some point, Red Hat hired all the CentOS developers. At that point said, nothing's going to change about the project, right? They're just struggling. We want to finance them. They are very useful to us. It's a good community. We want to support the community. We want to do the right thing. We're just going to give them money to do what they did in their free time, in their spare time before. And sometime later, they shifted the CentOS project from rebuilding Red Hat to basically being a different distribution that iterates faster, that is no longer a stable rebuild of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And that is where we're going to take this up. So, and the panel talked a lot about that. They talked a lot about, are they going more proprietary? Are they controlling as over their corporate influence? Are they using their corporate influence to control the community, right? And I sat in this panel, and if you listen to the whole thing in the end, and this is where my talk started, I was like, we just have to do nonprofit organizations, right? I mean, give all the code. Like, if the problem we want to solve is too much corporate control over the software, just give all the software to nonprofit organizations. Something will happen, and then we'll have freedom. And I looked at that from very different angles, right? And as it goes with keynote speeches, I worked on it up to the last minute. And the more I looked at it, I couldn't, like, the original plan was I just build out this solution. I find the solution, I tell everyone, I'm like, hey, I solved the problem. Welcome, Casca, thank you. And I just came up with more questions, right? So it didn't exactly work out that way. But I still want to pick up the first topic, that is one of the systemic issues that I see in all of this. And this is where systems come in, right? So everything is a system, essentially. We are complex systems, psychological, biological systems, and the communities and the organizations we build are complex social systems. So what happens systematically when we turn a community into cooperation? And I'm going to try to walk us through this one aspect, and then some questions that I took out of those, and we can then take the discussion afterwards. One disclaimer, I am not a part of the CentOS project. I am not a part of any of the other projects that happened as a result. I am not an employee of IBM or Red Hat, so I have no idea what was really going on. This is all my opinions and conjecture. It is stuff I can see with what I know about psychology and system design that could have been at play and that I think we need to be aware of when we build communities and organizations. So the good news is I don't have to worry about offending anyone or any political stakes I have in this. The bad news is I don't really know what's going on, right? Everything could have been very different. Just keep that in mind. But what I want to talk about is the systems we build, right? So we have Bob over here. And Bob is, as a member of human society, part of many different systems. Bob has his friends. Bob wants to do stuff with his friends. That stuff costs money. So eventually Bob gets a job. As life goes for many people, eventually Bob will also have a family. So he needs that job to support his family. And at some point, Bob and a number of his friends will start to do a hobby project, right? A community project. They happen all to be excited about free software, so they start their community projects. And these are all the nice systems that Bob is a part of. And in the same way, we have some kind of corporation, right? They are part of many different systems. They have all their employees. They have some products. They have their customers. There are a lot of dynamics and factors at play here. The nice thing if the system is set up like this, at that point is we have very strong connections between Bob and his job and his family, right? His job supports his family. His job can support everything else they do. But all the interconnections to the company and the product and their customers is very soft, right? So the company can basically say, oh, this project is really useful to us, right? We want to support it. We use it. Some of our employees contribute to it. And they can go to the project and say, hey guys, it would be really useful for us if you do this. And the project can be like, oh, this sounds useful to us, we're going to do it. Or the project could be, you know what, I don't think this benefits our project. We're just not going to do it. And the corporation's going to be like, okay, sounds bad, but what are we going to do, right? And life continues. Until eventually, what you will oftentimes see, the focus shifts, right? And we see this. This is a very simplified view, but we see it in volunteer-run organizations. You usually have an influx of people around the time that they are in college, because that is when they get involved with community stuff. And then you have a few hardcore people who stay very dedicated throughout all of their life, but as family becomes more important, their jobs become more important, you also see a lot of people going out of projects again. And what we can tell from online documentation as far as I read up on it, CentOS was at one point, maybe not through this, maybe through completely other reasons, struggling to maintain their contributions and their infrastructure. So corporation is like, oh, this project is kind of dying, what are we going to do? And they could basically say, hey, Bob, why don't you want to come work for us? Right? You're going to do the same thing. Your project is really important to us. We all care about the same values. Just come work for us. Do what you did before, but we'll pay you for it. And Bob's like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I did this in my free time before. Now I can make money off of it. They're like, hell yeah. Like, where do I sign? Right? Like, I mean, come on. That's a dream, right? We all want to make money off the thing we love. The problem we have, the systemic issue we have is now, all of these things are very strongly interconnected. So where before, the project and Bob could say, hey, lovely corporation, right? I know this would be best for your customer, but this is not best for our project. So we're not going to do this. And before they were like, okay, well now they come in and be like, well, you know, commercially for the product, it would be best if you did this in your future. I know it's not exactly what we hired you for, but we rather you did this. And Bob is like, well, that is not really the best for the project. And the company could be like, well, you can also find employment elsewhere. And now Bob is not like only thinking about what is best for the project. He also has to think about, do I really want to quit my job over this? Do I want to risk my livelihood? My friends are not just involved in the project. My friends are now also my coworkers. They will maybe stay with the company. Will I lose my friends over this? All of these issues are at play all the time when we more tightly integrate social circles of different people. It is one of the reasons why corporate campuses where people live and do all their free time and leisure stuff on a corporate campus work really, really well for motivation, but are a really, really strong pressure on the people psychologically to stay in that group, right? Because it becomes your world in effect. And I think this is something that we didn't previously talk about a lot. What is at play for the people involved in this project, and what can be potential downsides if we make a thing that people build also their job, right? And this strong interconnection between, now it's not only something I do that I care about very deeply, but it's also my livelihood. Can I still feed my family if I go against whatever decision somebody wants me to take? And I think about this a lot. Like I like tangling with social systems, so I thought about this a lot, and I started thinking, this is where I came from, right? Like, how do we solve this problem? Like, of course, how we solve this problem is we just give the code to the nonprofit, right? And then we maybe need to think about who will work for the for-profit, who will work for the nonprofit. The Linux Foundation, to a degree, does something similar, right? They hire the kernel developers, so it's kind of a neutral ground. There are issues with the Linux Foundation on other topics, but some stuff seems to work really, really well for them. And then I thought about it more, right? Like, what are we building? So what is Red Hat in a sense doing? They are building a lot of open source code. They're still licensing it freely. You can still take it and do it. And what are we actually trying to solve? Like, who is hurt right now by not being able to publicly get to the Red Hat Enterprise Linux source? And this took me back to the basics, really, like really the basics. Right? I think, what is even, why am I thinking about this? What do I care about? I mean, obviously I care about software freedom. And I went back and started to read the original Stallman papers on it, and I thought myself, like I felt like he understood the problem at the time, right? Like, you read his essays, he cares very deeply about people being able to help themselves and help other people, and I think he's a great inspiration to draw on. And I sit down again, I'm like, okay, they build code, they build a build pipeline, they build distribution channels, they build. And I started to realize, when our friend Richard Stallman came up with all these ideas, this is pretty much what the world looked like, the tech world looked like at that time. And you can read about this. The problem he had is he tried to change printers at his university. And he was debugging his whole operating system to get the printer to work and to write a new driver for his operating system, for that printer. And he couldn't do that because he couldn't get some of the libraries he needed to get that printer to work. Which means most of our ideas come from a time where one person could understand everything that was going on in this technical system. It had to be a very smart person, but he was able to understand all the issues at play at the technical system that he built. And we went from this to this, right? So we have a lot of computers, we have a lot of servers, we have networked things. This is where the Affero GPL started to happen, right? We saw people running software, not just distributing software to other computers. We saw software running as a network service. But we still had a very clear distinction between software and data. We still had very clear distinctions between who runs the infrastructure and who owns what part of it. And this is where basically this whole, there is no cloud, there is just other people's computers comes from, right? But we still could understand somewhat. We went to this. So now we don't just have servers and somebody running servers. We have servers that run something that's Kubernetes, that run something that is containers, that run something that also runs on your computers, but that also kind of runs on another system that runs more containers to build your containers to put into the system that they then run, that everybody will connect to. And in case you're curious, this is a smartphone. This is my perfect drawing of a smartphone. Just if it was not clear what I meant with this small symbol over here. Right, and we went from this to this. This is, and you're gonna think, oh, it's the internet. No, this is the dependency graph of a single application for banking that utilizes a microservice model. And that's not even talking about the whole, I hate the term, but I'm still going to use it, like the Web 3.0 stuff, right? And stuff like immutable infrastructure. I saw a talk at CopylefConf years ago that basically said, as more of our configuration starts to become code, are we also turning configuration into software? Like, and do I need to worry about the copyright of my configuration of my machine? Can I copyleft the configuration of my machine? And what does that mean? Where do I put it? Right? And all these things are still using licenses and ideas that we developed when we had a very clear understanding of what systems looked like. And when a single person could use, I could take the software in my machine, look at it, study it, understand it, improve it, and share it. And in essence, I think a lot of the basic ideas still hold true, right? I still care about software freedom. I still care about being able to run the stuff that I know. But at the same time, I think we need to ask ourselves, well, first of all, like, why do we even care, right? I personally, I know I care about it because I deeply care about the concept of fairness, openness, and being able to help your fellow people. I also happen to think, spoiler alert, open source is very good for like competing in open markets, right? So I think I'm a moderate capitalist at heart, and I think open source is also a very good way to efficiently and profitably run businesses. So it's not just the whole ethical issue, which is there, which I care about. It's also a issue where I think, how do we spend our resources? How do we spend our time? So that is why I care. And then the next question is, what does that mean, right? I care about freedom. I care about the user rights of software users. But what does that look like? What does this mean in 2024 and beyond? Like where the tech scene is moving. What exactly do we mean with this? What does it look like? And there is a. It should before it said what the heck is your point? There should have one more that is, have we understood the problem, right? And that is where I came from and went through this talk. I'm like, I'm not sure I understood my own problem yet, so I'm nowhere near presenting you with a solution. And this is where it takes me to, what the heck is your point of this talk? Is I really don't know, right? I thought I had a point in the beginning when I proposed this, And I just keep turning up more questions. I still think non-for-profit organizations are the next evolutionary step that we should take a look at as a community. So talk to the folks of the Open Culture Foundation, talk to people like the Software Freedom Conservancy that do physical sponsorship on a neutral ground, having means to give money to sustain projects that don't necessarily put the control into corporations. So there's a whole legal and licensing issue I think we could discuss and that I love to discuss after my talk. But I think these big presentations and main track speeches are also a good place to take us back to the basics, right? And this is where I ended up in this. And someone said to me before the presentation, it's only fitting, right? Because the whole IBM Red Hat thing is kind of a hot mess. So you would expect to a talk that talks about that to turn into a hot mess. So I'm staying on theme at least. But in the end, I really think we need to be more careful and we need to spend more time not to only think about what technical systems are we building, how can we empower users to understand what is going on, but also the social systems and the social dynamics that are at play as we interlink community interests, corporate interests, and the public interest, and be more careful about the systems that we design. And that is the end. So I don't know, I hope you found a point in all of this. If you found one, please let me know. I'm glad to talk to you. I think we still have some time for questions.
Yes, we still have
Thank you very
time
much.
to ask questions. So any question from you after our speaker's speech?
And I can take the time while they take the microphone to give credit. Thank you, Chris, for that perfect statement before. He was the one that told me, oh, it's okay that something that talks about that topic turns into a hot mess.
So, so one thing I'm kind of wondering here is if maybe the thing we should be thinking about and pushing for isn't just do we want a nonprofit organization, but maybe that middle piece needs to be thinking through what kinds of power organizations can't have, right? So one thing that the Postgres community did, and one thing the Ledger SMB community did when I was building that, was basically a clear viewpoint that the committees that control the infrastructure and all the rest of this cannot be dominated by a single company.
Yep.
And keeping that sort of viewpoint seems like it would be a necessary step in the middle. And I just thought I'd toss that out and see what you thought about it.
Absolutely. There are a lot of things I had to cut in the interest of time. One of the discussions I had, because one of the things that Red Hat did is previously all the source code was publicly available. You could go to git.santos.org and see all the source code that built their commercial distribution. And one of my friends was like, well, if all the source code was there, like you cannot make something not free anymore, right? And I tell him, yeah, but like, so before all the Git servers were run by the CentOS community, right? And then all of those became employees of Red Hat. If Red Hat is in charge of the source code, of the build system, of everything, and they just turn down the excess, what does the license still matter? Right? You don't have access to the stuff, you cannot do anything about the license. We could see the same thing with Microsoft controlling GitHub. Like if they turn off GitHub tomorrow, who is maintaining a mirror of all of the code that's at GitHub? All of these things, right? There is a lot more than just the source code and the binaries today. We have complex version control, we have complex build systems, and everybody that controls the pieces of the infrastructure has a certain level of power. And I think you phrased that very well. We need to think about who do we want to put in power over these different pieces, up to what level? And what should be, if the public interest is the goal we want to achieve for most of these things, like the broader user base, which parts need to be public infrastructure to a degree or community-run infrastructure, and which part are we okay with to have under corporate control? Absolutely.
I hope it helps. So, any question? We still can say one question. Okay, if you are so shy and not dare to ask question in front of us, it's okay because I believe Simon is still in this room, so he can wait for you. And thank you for your listening. And our next session, let's thank you for Simon. Give him a big hand, okay?
Thank you. And I'm here all weekend, so you can find me at the FSFE booth in the T building. Thank you very much.
Yes.